Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. This video is my review of the latest summon showcase, Dulcet Delights, which features two returning limited time Valentine's Day characters. So Valentine's Addis and Valentine's Melody are back for the first time since February of this year. This showcase came out of nowhere. It is a total curveball in an October month that's already been jam-packed with good summon showcases like Ilia's Prize Showcase, the Gala Remix, which had limited time Halloween adventurers, and even the Gala and returnee Gala that happened at the very beginning of the month and end of last month. So a lot has been going on with the summon showcases. They've definitely mixed up the formula, but it's also meant our Wormite is stretched super thin right now. And speaking of surprises, we also found out about what our next event is going to be. So unlike what I thought, it's totally unrelated to Heinwald's, Corinne, and Lathna's arc. It is not a raid event. It's going to be a facility event called the Phantom's Ransom. It looks really cool though. It features a new Phantom Thief character who's trying to steal away the lead singer of the opera. So the Phantom Thief is known as Lapis, and she's trying to steal away Belladonna, the singer. And in Belladonna's absence, Karina has to step up to sing for the opera. It looks like Karina's going to get an alt. There's also a whale dragon called Giovanni who seems to play a role in the story. And apparently our party is invited to this opera by none other than Lucretia. So I'm really excited about this event. Obviously, this probably means a summon showcase with Lapis, maybe Belladonna, a Karina alt, that whale dragon. And because of the timing, it's likely to be a Gala showcase, which means it would also likely have Gala Poseidon or whoever we're going to get for the Gala this month. As an aside, on this upcoming event, we're going to get our first event facility that boosts the power of mana casters as well as the power of bows. So I'm really looking forward to that. That event actually starts on the 27th, but you'll notice that the Dulcet Delights banner goes from the 23rd until the 30th. So it definitely looks to me like a Gala situation. Usually when the Galas come out, they will release them a little bit into the time of the next event so that you have a few days to grow attached to the characters, right? Read the stories, and then all of a sudden the Gala shows up and you're like, I gotta get these characters. I love the story. So that's what I think about that. I feel like it's pretty much written on the wall now that like this is going to happen at the end of this month. We'll get that Gala. They've definitely thrown a lot of surprises our way throughout October, so who knows? But that's one consideration you should have in the back of your mind when it comes to whether or not you should summon on Dulcet Delights. And in my opinion, there's basically two reasons you would want to summon on this. Number one is you're just a really big Melody or Addis fan. These characters are back. It's October. They haven't been around since February. There's no indication here they're going to become unlimited like the first year Valentine's characters eventually did. So in my opinion, it's going to be a while before we see them available again. They also weren't part of the Dream Summon special as well, so you may not be able to get a hold of these if you just love these characters for quite some time. Now besides that, the other consideration here is going to be if you want the critical damage co-ability. Valentine's Melody has that co-ability, and she's one of only two characters right now who has this, the other one also being limited, Halloween Mim. So personally, as a backliner, I do think Halloween Mim is better, because within the flame element, Halloween Mim can give dragon haste, whereas Valentine's Melody, her chain co-ability isn't super relevant within the wind element, but nevertheless, both of them just having critical damage for 90% of your applications, maybe even more than that, that's going to be enough. That's the main thing that you want to use them for on the back line. And in particular, if you're interested in some of these speed comps that revolve around Mitsuba, for the DPS that are run in those comps, this tends to be a preferred backliner because Mitsuba basically makes your hits guaranteed to be critical, and having extra critical damage in that scenario is pretty valuable. So for instance, for the 3 Veronica 1 Mitsuba speed comp of Master Kaiyan, well, you would want a Valentine's Melody or a Halloween Mim in your backline to make sure you have that critical damage co-ability. So basically, I think those are the two considerations here. You either really like these characters or you're trying to break into some of the Mitsuba speed comps and you really want that critical damage co-ability. That's not the only place that's used. There are certainly some characters with really high critical rates for whom critical damage is a good backline option to begin with. So I should say that. It's not just in cheese comps, it's also sometimes just a good backline option. But in my opinion, you can kind of replace it. Like, that's when it's really crucial to what you're trying to do. In other cases, you could probably just throw on a blade co-ability, a dagger co-ability, and a wand co-ability, and you're not going to be at your peak performance as far as your DPS, but for many characters, that's going to be sufficient for what you're trying to do. But in those speed runs, it's kind of make or break in some cases to be able to clear fast enough. So yeah, I think that's my overall take on the banner. There's that limited time appeal to this showcase. Unfortunately, no indication seemingly that our Halloween characters are coming back. So one consideration you might have had with this is like, well, I want Valentine's Melody, but I want Halloween Mim more. And so instead of going for this, I'm going to wait and try to get Halloween Mim closer to Halloween. It looks like our Halloween event is the opera event. Maybe it'll have Halloween characters also on that same gala, but right now it doesn't necessarily seem like it. It doesn't look particularly Halloween aesthetic or Halloween related. So yeah, I think we might have had the shortest Halloween ever this year with the 3-day banner and the Postmortem Panic event. So as for everything else on this showcase, just to clarify, they are not limited. So all the other Valentine's characters and everything else, it's added, it's been part of the permanent summoning pool. It was added, I think, in August before the first anniversary of the game, around then. So none of those you should try to go out of your way to pull necessarily here. They are in an appearance rate up, but it also just so happens that none of them are especially profoundly good or necessary. So Valentine's Hildegard, the other Valentine's 5-star, she just really doesn't have too much of a home right now. Within the flame element, you have some really good flame healers such as Halloween Lowen. For more DPS-centric comps, you have Yukata Cassandra. Besides that, you also have Verica, who can cleanse stun and has the nice Dragon's Claws chain co-ability. And even Orion, he is okay. I mean, he's fine as a flame healer, but he's probably on a similar tier to Valentine's Hildegard, where he's sort of a lesser tier below the other three. And unfortunately for Valentine's Hildegard, there's just not that many flame characters that revolve around the energy mechanic. You can use Nadine in that way. You can use Incognito Nefaria. There's also Gala Cerise, who does benefit from having a variety of buffs, including energy, and she does have a nice chain co-ability that works with energy. But outside of those characters, flame isn't really a deep element when it comes to the energy mechanics, so that's kind of Valentine's Hildegard's main niche. Maybe she could get better if one day she gets a mana spiral. That is also true of Melody and Addis here, but the fact that they didn't immediately get a mana spiral with this banner rerun, and the fact that we're not likely to see Valentine's again until February, I don't think they would get a mana spiral anytime between now and then, to be honest. Other than that, at the lower rarity, we have Valentine's Ezlith. She once had a day in the sun. Her heyday, she was the enabler for a lot of Burning Punisher comps in the lower difficulty Mercurial Gauntlet, but that time has since passed. As for Durant, very strong adventurer, high DPS in a vacuum. The problem is he's not very cohesive with the end game difficulty light content, specifically Master Kayan, and I think looking ahead, I have to consider Master Agito and above kind of the end game threshold at this point, because High Dragons are broken wide open. Any character you can bring to High Dragons and succeed do very well, especially if you have those High Dragon Banes. And Expert Agito is pretty flexible in general, but with the Master difficulty Agito and above, things start to not be as flexible. And so with Master Kayan, there are two problems that Durant faces. Number one, he doesn't have access to Dispel. You need a lot of Dispel in that fight. It's going to make Dispel characters at a premium there. And number two, he is anti-synergistic with Belina, who is a staple in those runs. What I mean by this is that Durant really wants to stay at max HP in order to make the most of his passives, but Belina really wants to stay at low HP. And if you're running with a Grace, typically she's not going to bring any healing shared skills because she knows she wants to keep that Belina at a low HP. But Durant, if you take even a small amount of chip damage and there's no access to healing, well, you're in a world of trouble because you can't get back up to full HP. So I think that that's kind of the problem that Durant faces. The workaround to that, of course, is you can run healing double buff on him if you're trying to use him in Master Kaion and some of the traditional Belina, Patya, Grace rooms. That would work well to keep him at full HP if you play carefully. He is a high DPS, but if he got like Dispel on his Mana Spiral or something like that whenever he gets that, I think that he could have a lot more potential. As of now, he is a really fun character, great story, great voice talent, obviously, but in the meta, he just hasn't had his day to really shine just yet. And as for the dragons here, well, they're a pretty good consolation prize if you're going for some of these limited adventurers. Vayu, still very respectable wind dragon. Skill damage is at a premium. It's no Midgard Stormer 0. If you're newer, I would suggest you use your Sunlight Stones on Midgard Stormer 0 personally. But Vayu, even with one copy, it's a very good dragon. So I respect Vayu. Epimetheus, similarly, it's a Poison Punisher dragon. Not too preferred on that many characters. A lot of characters tend to run Cat Sheath or Andromeda or Fatalis, or maybe even Shinobi in a long run fight. But Epimetheus is good on characters like Durant, who don't rely upon skill damage, but rather want to have a high amount of strength. So yeah, that's kind of my overview of the banner as a whole. Really, you want to be looking at Melody and Addis here, and everything else is going to be available on a permanent basis, but there are some nice things here you could pick up along the way. And one thing I do want to praise and be positive about here is the fact that there are even 4-star things featured at all. If they're not going to introduce new 4-stars into the game, I definitely hope that they continue to put relevant and popular 4-star characters on a rate up so that newer players can grab those characters when they are featured. Because back in the day, a big part of summoning advice for any player was go for those 4-stars, not necessarily the 5-stars, because the 4-stars tend to be easier to pick up and target. But unless they're on a rate up, that's really difficult to do, as we saw with Halloween Lowen when he returned for the Gala Remix. So I hope they keep putting these 4-stars on a rate up, like maybe on the next Gala, if there's a Karina alt, maybe they could put the regular Karina on an appearance rate up. That might be kind of funny since it's the exact same character in a way, but in general, I hope we continue to see these characters. Like, I want to see Templar Hope and Patya become more available to players and make it so that it's more of a guarantee that if you want that character, you can get it. But anyway, let's talk about the characters themselves. I would say similar to Hildegard, Ezlith, Durant, and Orion, unfortunately Melody and Addis are also at a spot or in a place where they're not super relevant to any content right now. That is why I mainly say you want to pull here if you want Melody as a backliner, but not necessarily even for use in battle. And Addis is kind of in a similar position where he's sort of hard to run, which I'll talk about in just a second. But let's start with Valentine's Melody. Valentine's Melody, besides her critical damage co-ability, has Now You'll See What I'm Made Of as her first skill and a Splash of Affection as her second skill. Now You'll See What I'm Made Of, it deals wind damage directly ahead. It has a very funny animation where she kind of stumbles forward in a line and creates a rectangular debuff zone. And that's basically sort of similar in shape to like Wedding Elisand's buff zone. It's a rectangle. You have to be kind of careful with this skill because of the amount of motion that's in it. I remember using this skill back in the day with High Mercury, back when the attacks did a lot of damage. And I would accidentally, run into people's bubbles while using this skill. I would accidentally run into whirlpools because it really moves Melody a lot. So you'd have to be careful about where you pointed her with this. Now that High Mercury is easier, I don't think that's as much of an issue, but it is something to note about this. And the debuff zone debuffs enemy defense by 15% and lasts for 10 seconds. Pretty solid. It also deals damage, a decent amount of damage, and same with Melody's second skill, causes poison and deals damage. Melody's kind of set up here as a support. 2 abilities revolve around poison. One is poison equals team strength plus 10%, the other is poison punisher plus 30%, and then finally she has bog res. But interestingly enough, I do think that most of Melody's damage tends to come from her own personal DPS, the damage off of her skills, rather than her team contribution and the buffs that she provides to others, as well as the debuff she provides on the boss. So that obviously depends on how stacked your teammates are, but yeah, I do think that tends to be where she really shines, is in her own damage. And that being said, she's still like sort of middling, like maybe top 10, top 15 as far as her DPS output. but definitely not near the tops of the DPS charts. When it comes to Valentine's Addis, he is a character I see a lot of potential in. As soon as I saw Valentine's Addis portrait, I just really became a huge Addis fan. I think he looks so handsome. I love how he's so calm, he's so still, he's reposed in this beautiful scene. Look at the background. This is one of my favorite portraits in Dragalia Lost, so this turned me into a major Addis fan. I did have the Wind Element Addis built up before, but I really was not too familiar with his stories. I hadn't really read about him very much, and I wouldn't say he was one of my favorite characters. But when I saw this Valentine's Addis, I was like, yo, a Shadow Bow, Enmity character, love the portrait, he looks super great here. This is a character I know I'm gonna love, and yeah, Valentine's Addis is actually one of my favorite Shadow characters. I did a lot of grinding, like hundreds of runs of Master Difficulty High Jupiter with him over time. Don't get to play him as much now, and that's one of the things that I think kind of holds him back is in Kaiyan. He's not particularly good. So let's talk about his kit. He is a low HP character, crisis character, enmity character. Those are all sort of synonymous. His first skill deals more damage and causes poison with a higher damage modifier as well. The lower Addis's HP is. One thing that's nice about this is it does cause poison. That is something that differentiates him from Veronica, because while she does more damage to poison foes, her low HP skill can't cause poison itself. So that is one thing I like about Valentine's Addis. If you're running a full low HP auto comp, he is kind of nice to run together with Veronica because he can be the poison enabler and both of them want to be at a low HP. His second skill, Love's Triumph. If the user's HP is less than 30% of their max when using it, it gives all teammates a 1-use shield that nullifies damage less than 30% of the user's max HP. If your HP is above or equal to 30% of their max when using it, then it reduces him to 20% of his max HP and grants him a 1-use divergent shield that nullifies damage less than 80% of his max HP. That can stack with ordinary shields. So if you use this when you're at a higher HP, it's going to take you down into that low HP range at 20% and give you that 80% shield for protection. If you use it again once you're already at low HP, it's not going to reduce your HP any further, but it's going to give the entire team a 30% of your max HP shield. So typically, if you don't have a lot of unavoidable damage you're dealing with, you would mainly want to use this once to get to that low HP to begin with, and then you don't necessarily need to cast it on cooldown every time. Probably in most contexts, it's worth it to just have the extra shield for safety, but in general, it's not something like, let's say you're in the Mercurial Gauntlet, like in a vacuum, you wouldn't want to cast this skill repeatedly, right? But in a lot of content, it probably doesn't really matter too much. Instead, what you'd want to do is continue spamming the first skill when you're at that low HP. And the thing that made Addis really fun for me, his co-ability and chain co-ability are kind of basic. It's pretty much what you expect. Skill haste, and then he does have a nice low HP light res. But what made him really fun is actually his ability, specifically the third one. When his HP is 30% or below, you get 20% strength and you get 10% attack rate. Combined with the Shadow Agito skill, which boosts attack rate, he feels very fast to charge up his skills. It feels like blazing fast to use this first skill. It's really satisfying, and the first skill, you're seeing really high modifiers on it typically because you're at low HP, and it feels like Natalie or Veronica. Veronica's in a whole league of her own now, especially in 2.0 and with the Mitsuba comps. But like Addis, you could pop off 1 million damage or something with this first skill. It feels very good. One other thing to note about Addis, he does have Poison Punisher, Paralysis res 100%, and I was going to say the poison on his first skill is actually kind of notable because it deals more than twice the poison damage of pretty much any other character with the exception of Delphi if Addis is at low HP. So at its maximum potential, his poison damage, I think over all the ticks that it does, can deal like 600% damage in addition to his skill. So yeah, Addis, he is very satisfying to play. The big problem with him being he's ranged. And that is a little bit weird to hear because that doesn't come up too often, and I don't even think it's really the only thing holding him back here. But let me explain what I mean by this. Valentine's Addis could theoretically fit into these Patia, Grace, Belina comps, right? He wants to be at low HP. That's the same thing Belina wants. He really wants defensive buffs provided by Patya and provided by Grace because he wants to be able to survive while he's at a low HP. He wants Grace's life shields. He can cause poison, allowing Dublina and Patya to run Poison Punisher Worm Prince, in addition to the strengthable buffs, which everybody will want to run, of course. But the problem is, well, Kayan can deal a lot of damage. And I don't know about y'all, but I am a Belina player who doesn't have an Andromeda. And in my experience, without Andromeda's extra defense as a dragon, I use Fatalis, and Fatalis, sometimes I'm not super safe, depending on what the Grace is up to. I always run out of the purple zones in the center when relevant, but even when I'm getting hit by the purple zones outside of the center, as a melee character, sometimes I see my shield get down to almost empty, depending on what the Grace is up to and how many buffs the Patya is casting. So that is the risk I feel with Valentine's Addis. You would ideally want to run him with Cat Sheath, but you'll probably have to run him with Andromeda, and not everybody's going to have Andromeda in Master Kayan specifically. So the reason I say that is if I'm cutting it close with a Fatalis Belina, even when I run outside of the main arena into the non-battleground portion of the arena, well, with a ranged character, you're going to be taking more damage. So unfortunately, I feel like Valentine's Addis's life might be kind of precarious in that fight, with him being at 20% of his HP, and Belina, of course, because of Dragon Drive, she gets a defensive buff while she's in Dragon Drive as well. Not only is she melee, she's like super melee because of being in Dragon Drive. So that's the problem I feel with Addis. Like, I think he's a little bit at risk to die accidentally if your Grace is not at the top of her game. If you have Andromeda, I think it's probably less likely because Andromeda is amazing. She gives you 100% defense buff when your HP is low. That should be enough to keep Valentine's Addis alive. But as a Cat Sheath Addis, which is where you'd want to be, I feel like it is actually kind of risky. Now, I haven't used him there too much myself. There are other shadow bows I've brought to that content, which I won't get into at this point, but there are some other shadow bows. But yeah, Valentine's Addis, like, I love this character, so if he can be used for it and I'm wrong on this, definitely let me know. I certainly think he can clear. If you're playing carefully and you're all on the same page, I certainly think he can clear. But the other factor, of course, is just going to be, are people letting in bows? Now might be a particularly good time to try that, right? To tempt fate and go as a bow, and maybe people will let you in. But the two types of rooms I tend to see in Master Kayan are, one, the dagger, lance, staff rooms, which is basically Belina, Grace, and Patya. And the other room is the triple wand and dagger room, which is the Veronica Mitsuba. So I feel like Valentine's Addis is just kind of at a spot where he's hard to use in the endgame, but he is so satisfying to play. If y'all haven't tried him out and you have him in your collection, give him a try. He is very satisfying to play. It feels really fun to charge up his first skill. One of my favorite bow characters by far. All I can really say for Valentine's Addis is I hope he gets a mana spiral. I could see him having a lot of potential if he has a mana spiral. The fact that Veronica is like the queen of low HP DPS right now, part of that is thanks to her mana spiral, right? So you can imagine if Valentine's Addis gets a mana spiral and his modifiers are just sick and ungodly like Veronica's, he could be right back up there. He could be in the mix with all these Veronica speed comps. It's not the case right now. Probably won't be the case at least through February, but maybe he'll get that mana spiral that he needs to really shine. Either way, love this man. He's one of my favorites. So yeah, Valentine's Addis, personal affections aside, like, I don't think it's really worth going for him. Hate to say it. Personally, I would recommend just wait and see. Do your free daily tenfold summons. You may get the character you're hoping for anyway. And if you don't, you'll at least know what the next banner is by the time this one is about to end, so you can make a more informed decision. I think that's pretty much going to do it for today, everyone. Don't really have anything else to share on this summon showcase. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Were you surprised to see a Valentine's banner return out of nowhere? Because I definitely was. And also let me know what you think about the upcoming event. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on that. I'm loving the aesthetic, loving the vibe of that, so even though it's not our Lovecraftian horror tale for Halloween, I think it's going to be pretty fun nevertheless. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Take care, and I'll see you next time.